I have a student who is also having yoga lessons privately. And it's a special type of yoga where they concentrate on the breathing all the time. So she does most of it sitting down in this posture. And what the teacher is saying all the time is feel your sitting bones. So it's a bit like us when we stand and we're feeling the legs. So you've got the one spine that's coming down that then branches into the two sitting bones. And we just want to really be aware of the split, the one splitting into two, the same way as when we're doing our standing exercises. So now let's just reach forwards one hand at a time. So as you're reaching with the right hand and turning to the left, just feel yourself sinking into the left sitting bone. So I turn, and now most of my weight is on my left buttock. And then I pull, and it goes into the right. Exactly the same way as it would if we were doing this exercise standing. A lot of our work is directed towards relaxing the sacrum, relaxing the grip that we have on the sacrum with the hip bones, and feeling as though the sacrum is expanding across, it's widening. I'm only really going to relax that if I can feel each side. If I feel it just as one area, it's just an indication that it's all locked up into one. And it's that tension in the hip area, in the sacral area, that is largely responsible for our anxiety. So if this area is tight, then it's squeezing the sacrum, and that is pushing energy up into the head all the time, feeding our anxiety. So it's easy to relax that area when we're sitting down, because we're not really having to use the legs to bear our weight. When we stand up, it's more difficult, because pain comes into the system and the tensions associated with pain. Then reaching up. It's exactly the same thing. I reach up with my right hand, but I sink down into my left buttock. Remember, if we're using energy, then the energetic line is always open both ends. So if part of me is reaching up, another part of me must be reaching down. If I'm using force, then I'm relying on one end of that line being closed. sinking down into the ground through this. And you can feel, if you're sitting on a chair, you can feel it going into the chair, and then visualize the legs of the chair sinking into the ground. We always want to be aware of the bigger picture, of the whole system of which we are a part. So when you're touching another person, you're as much aware of them as you are of yourself. And that's what we call equilibrium, without which there is no energy. We're relaxing the sacrum, loosening the hips from either side of the sacrum, and bringing flexibility into the lumbar spine. And now let's try both together, pulling the head right back. And then bringing the hands down and pulling the head forward so you're looking down on top of the fingertips. And up and out. And turning one hand face down, turning the head towards the hand that's looking up. And then just swap the hands round and let the head turn towards the hand that's looking up. And the hands behind. And now rolling the head. Then change direction. Now back into prayer posture. Feel the craniosacral system. So your skull atop your spine with the sacrum and the tail at the bottom. So we know what it looks like from anatomical drawings. If you don't, then download a few. The bones of the spine, especially at the bottom, are really chunky and knobbly. You want to feel that that craniosacral system is almost floating above the hip bones. It feels that the hip bones are making like a cup, and your sacrum, spine, and skull are floating in it. We don't want the hips to grip too firmly, because if they do, then gravity can't do its work of sinking, because I'm squeezing against it all the time. I'm trying to push up into my head. So if gravity can't descend properly, then the levity, the correct rising, will not be able to lift either. So what comes into the head will be too much. It will be this sort of frenetic activity which feeds anxiety. What we want coming up is like it's almost like a firefly or like a will-o'-the-wisp. It's like a light that just rises very gently up into the head, and then the head just becomes this source of light and insight rather than this sort of The problem with the technology, we become dependent upon it. So we end up being slaves to the technology. And the first technology really was language. So we learned to speak and communicate with words. And then it got to the point where we can't stop talking, because we're talking in our heads all the time. And that is anxiety, that inability to control the language flow. And it is possible to just shut that off, but it requires us to really relax down here so that we can properly sink down the spine. There's like a density gradient within the spine, with the sort of the heavy stuff naturally settling at the bottom, and then the light rarefied stuff rising up to the top. That's the way it should be. And now let's just try a different posture of meditation. The problem, John always used to say, the problem with sitting is that it's basically double weighted. You're just one thing, and we know that the human body is very much two things. And so we need a little bit of asymmetry. This is why this posture has limited use, prayer, because both sides of the body are pretty much exactly the same. So now let's just, making a fist with your left hand, just place it over your dantian, so it's touching your belly. And the other hand, just have it resting on the knee. That's it. It can be palm up or palm down, doesn't matter. You want that feeling of roundness in both arms. So you don't want to let the arms collapse against the sides. They're always coming out of the shoulders strongly. And feel the spiral. So this is curving, and then when it gets to the fist, it tightens into this whorl, WHORL. And then you just meditate like this. Again, just concentrating on spreading across the back here, the sacrum. So really, it's just a matter of attentive patience. Put myself in a posture, try to maintain it and not collapse, and just wait and watch, look and learn. And you can watch it and notice that when you start thinking to yourself, just bring your attention then to here, and you will have tensed up around the sacrum. And then if we just meditate, with one hand resting in the other and the thumbs touching, then when you're in this posture, just be very much aware of the asymmetry, the fact that one hand is being cradled by the other. One hand is the container and the other hand is contained. And then just swap the hands around and just feel just how different it is. Very much we are two people. We are a left side and a right side. They have quite different characters. Moving from side to side within riding horse. So I start the movement by pulling the ground with this leg, and I finish the movement by squeezing this leg into this one. The empty leg activates, the full leg then empties to push me completely into this leg. If I was to push the ground with my leg, straighten my leg in order to push at the ground, then the other end of the leg here would actually be pushing into my sacrum. Now, if I pull the ground with my foot, then the other end of my leg is pulling at my sacrum. It's trying to stretch the sacrum, trying to enlarge the sacrum. This is why pulling is so important. It's stretching and enlarging the body. So when I pull the ground here, there's the feeling that this hip bone is trying to pull away from the sacrum. My sacroiliac is being stretched open. And then here, this just empties. Don't think of it, this leg, as pushing the ground in order to get yourself into this foot. Just think of this leg as just flushing out. It's just emptying of its weight. And that is moving me into this foot. And then this foot tightens to pull at the hip and the ground. And I start moving, and then this leg empties, it flushes out in that direction, which moves me in this direction. Trying to be careful, make sure that we get the movement initiated by the pull, which lasts long enough so that when I start straightening this leg, it's not pushing into this part of my sacrum. It's simply emptying. So it's like I have to set up some momentum here, and then this can just go with it and just make sure it's complete at the end here. Pulling is really important, and it's difficult because we're not used to doing that. And we want to feel what's involved in a good pull. Basically, the leg is bending. So my knee is obviously bending and going out, but also I want to feel it breaking here in the hip. But what I don't want to do is just bend the knee and pull myself across like this, because you can see that I'm just not really in the leg. So I need to bend the knee and send it out, which I can lift my heel to do that if I want, but also I break here so that when I'm brought into the foot, if anything, I'm leaning this way rather than this way. Break here, but I have to stay sunk so that this has an angle, the angle of the hip. The feeling is that the hip joint is heavy. It's like there's a weight hanging down from here. And that keeps me down as I come into the foot. And then I really do get a sense that I've gone into the ground rather than simply on top of the leg. Really something we should have started when we were young, before the body had finished its growing. Just have to make the most of what we have. And so I just have to be careful I don't move too soon. To make sure it is this leg that's pulling, that's moving me. It's not this leg pulling that's being helped largely by this leg. This leg is pulling. So I stay in this leg as long as I can. Stay there. And then slowly I start moving. And then this can just add to that. And what surprised me really with this work is just how close to the ground one really needs to be. Dr. Chi used to say, thighs parallel to the ground. So we just really need to get down, because if you don't, there's a sense that from them, you're squeezing yourself up above the min meng all the time. The feeling is that the min meng disappears, that the curvature of the lower back disappears, so that I can sink straight down into the sacrum. So we want to feel the sacrum and the Dan Chen as like a unit, rather than the Ming Men and the Dan Chen. It's the sacrum. The sacrum is like this cup holding the Dan Chen. So when I pull with the foot, pulling the ground with the foot, but the other end is pulling up my sacrum. but also it's pulling my sacrum under. This is what I have to make sure. If I don't get the break here, then it'll pull my bum out like this. I'm slipping underneath my dantian with my sacrum. Again, you look like the monkey, like the gorilla. You know, when you see monkeys, like gorillas or chimpanzees walking around, or orangutan even more so, their fists, their hands are sort of below their knees. Yeah, so their hands are used to being on the ground. This is the feeling we want. So if you can get the feeling that your hands can descend beneath your knees, then it's a very different mind. So here. And again, it's very much like I'm trying to find something that's on the ground. I'm no longer in my head with my own thoughts. I'm just very attentive. Okay, let's bring it into right across. So feel the roundness in the arms, pulling from the back heart. The back heart is opposite the front deep heart, so the lower heart. So as I do ward off, I don't want my shoulder blades to come up too much. It's not this. I'm not coming over the top so much as trying to spread my shoulder blades apart, but also drop them down my back so that I'm connecting to this point a little bit lower than where we expect. So the back part of a center is lower down than the front part. So the front heart is really the thymus, and the back heart is the deep heart in the hollow of the chest. It's the same here. So the front of the center is the dantian, or you can even think of it as the navel. And then the back of the center is the sacrum, which is beneath it. And the same here. So the front center is the forehead, the third eye. And then the back is where the spine just comes up into the skull. So again, that's significantly lower, the back point. I want to be able to put my mind in the back heart. And I want to be able to put my mind definitely into the sacrum here. I want to feel the front and the back of each center. And then let's try the 2 circles. And this feeling of getting behind someone with the arm. So the arm has to expand into its circle. If you were to measure the arm, the length of the arm, it would be growing into the circle. It's not contracting into a circle. It's at its longest when it's circular. Again, I want to make sure I'm using my legs correctly. So straightening this leg to push me around to the side and then bending that leg to pull me back. It's the same quality in the arm. The arm is straightening into this curve, or lengthening, if you like, into this curve. And then it slips around, it comes back and turns over. And that's the catch of the ground. That's the point where I start pulling myself back with the foot. Pull, extend, and pull. And so it's very important to get the legs right. Otherwise, you'll always be battering your sacrum with your action on the ground. And then the sacrum just can't relax. And so gravity can't operate upon you properly. And then the rising energy, the real levity, cannot get up to the head top. And then just let the hand drop to brush the knee. And gradually, as you continue, you get lower, so it feels that your hand is getting beneath your knee. And then you just have a different mind. You just have a mind that's just working. It's lost interest in whatever's going on around you. Now you see it's become the figure of 8. So this hand is brushing the knee, but this hand is is visualizing, I'm imagining that it's going to penetrate this point here. When I get it right, when I get into my sacrum, it doesn't hurt so much. So that's how I know that it's not really the pain that's stopping me from getting it right. We just don't like the mind, that quiet mind, the serious gravitas that befalls us when we're just working well and correctly. We don't like forgetting self. Yeah, the same thing, but from an arrow, figure of eight. Using my hand to brush the knee, and you see I've got my fingers slightly below my knee. If you can't get them there, then just imagine that you are. You know, we can visualize, we can use the imagination. That's for me what makes us human. It's our imagination. It's not our rational mind. In a sense, a computer has a much better rational mind than we do. But a computer cannot imagine. Other foot. Remember when you were a kid and you'd go into the garden and lift a stone and be amazed by all the strange creepy crawlies that the stone had been concealing. So a completely different world you've revealed. It's the feeling here when you sink and get down into the legs. It's like the world beneath your knees is of a different order, completely different quality to the one that's up here around your shoulders and your head. Okay. And now let's just try a little bit of this one. Just gentle. With the same leg movements, I pull with the empty leg, and then the one that was full just empties out to continue the movement. The leg is doing exactly the same as what the arm is doing, or rather the arm is doing exactly the same as what the leg is doing. Sense that it starts in the leg, slightly before the hand, the arm. Here, try and make sure you get the straight leg straight. This leg is straight, this arm is straight, and they bend, and then the other side straightens. And then the other side. So you can imagine you're in a room with a very low ceiling, so you're having to crouch. If you rise up, you'll bang your head. In the Castaneda books, Don Juan uses that visualization as a way of just getting his attention on the top of the head in the right way. And Castaneda said he only really got it when he was working in a warehouse with a forklift truck, and he went under this into this space that had a low ceiling, and he actually felt it. He felt the ceiling almost brushing the top of his head, and that's when he caught the feeling. But we need a little bit of reality to feed the imagination. So what feeds the imagination is the teaching. So if the teacher tells you something should be happening in your energy, but you don't feel it, then you imagine it. But also your own intuition. Every now and then you think, oh, wow, what was that? And you get a feeling. And they become these little beacons that if you can concentrate on them and work with them, will actually take you forwards into the world of energy. And if you practice, then you'll get those all the time. Practice generates insight. And it's very important that your insights come from your practice, not from the clever mind extrapolating. And now let's just try waving hands. So again, it's just the same exercise. Everything is the same. Now let's just try a little bit of stepping. Again, with the figure of 8. And the steps can be really small. So when we step, we just have to make sure we step like a cat, very gently and lightly, because if I bang my foot down, it's going to also bang up into my sacrum and ruin all that work I've done to stretch and spread the sacrum. Each footfall kisses the ground. But it's not just a peck, it's a real French kiss. So you're sticking your tongue into the ground, you're extending your root, and at the same time, you're sucking the tongue out of the ground into your own mouth or foot. So you're joining. There's this battle of tongues. See, I've got a good imagination. The imagination improves as the memory fails. It's almost like you replace the bad memories with these wonderful visualizations. And gradually you become perfect. Went to see John Cage, the American composer, give a talk. He was my hero at the time. It was the event of his 70th birthday, so 1982. And this talk was basically him just giving a list of all the little adjustments he'd made in his life to improve his health. Now, this was the healthy 80s. At one point, he just looked up at the audience with a big smile and said, "This means that when I die, I'll be the healthiest I've ever been in my life." He lived another 10 years. Releasement. Release. Release the leg here. It comes away and it loops forwards. You want to get away from this feeling of the leg being like this log that I've got to sort of move heavily. It's just loose and we can whip out in this sort of very figure of 80 way. And then the other foot. Back to riding horse. Again, sinking down into my legs, but very much via the sacrum. Want to become really aware of the sacrum. It's the center of the body. Its name in Latin is sacrum os. Os means bone, and sacrum just means sacred. No one knows why it's called the sacred bone, but apparently in Chinese, the Chinese name for it also translates as sacred bone. So there's obviously a reason why the ancients thought of it as the sacred bone. It's the most important bone in the body. for our purposes. And then bringing it up. Just a little bit of this before my computer dies. This should be an exercise that we're always coming back to when we practice, in the same way that riding horses. This is like the complement to riding horse. Riding horse settles everything into this sturdy structure, and this loosens everything up to this point of almost collapse. They're both very important, obviously. We want to just reach that perfect balance. And then just let it settle. Okay, very good.